Welcome back to After Effects Graphic Designers. We're going to be working on another sequence in this video. We're going to be tackling similar things to the previous videos, just building on top of our skills and toolbox incrementally. The focus today is looking at what they call a graph editor and speed graph. And that's a tool that's going to help us make our animations a little more sophisticated and a little more refined. We're also going to be looking at combining multiple types of media into one project. Alright, so let's get into it. I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to start a new project and I'm going to bring in a piece of media, import a file. I'm going to locate that bit of media. For me, it's on my desktop, and it's this logo here. Now, for this sequence, I'm not going to import the file, the native Illustrator or Photoshop file as a composition. I'm just going to do it as what we call footage. I'm going to open that up. And footage. Click OK. And we see here I've just brought in a logo from Illustrator. If I double click on that, we can view that piece of footage, and it is a single layer with a transparent background. But you'll notice that I don't have a composition here. There's nothing in my timeline window. So let's go ahead and create a composition from within inside After Effects. We go to Composition and New Composition, or it's Command N. We'll continue to work in the square format for the moment. We're going to make sure that we have a frame rate of 25 frames per second. And again, we'll keep that duration of 10 seconds. You can have whatever color background you like. And I'm going to click OK. Oh, I neglected to give my composition a name. So I'm going to select my composition, hit return on the keyboard, and then I can actually type in a name for that composition. Now, to add something to my composition, namely this logo, I can do it a couple of different ways. I can drag it either into a canvas kind of window, or I can drag it into our timeline window. I think we can even drag it into that composition, and you can see that it's been added there. We can also just drag it straight down into the timeline, and it'll be added into our stack, into our layer stack there, and you can see its instance across the timeline. I want to combine a few different types of media, and I'm going to grab a JPEG from a stock media site. I've got Unsplash open here, and I need something that is appropriate for my client. So I want a mountain scene, and I reckon this one here. I'm going to download that to my downloads folder. Now remember, it is important to make sure you keep all of your material together. So I'm just going to move that file that I've downloaded into my working folder that's got my logo, that's now got my JPEG, and I'll just go back over to After Effects. I'm going to save my project, my After Effects project, in the same folder as our media, so that we can keep everything together. Just making sure our files are managed. Okay, so that's looking good. we'll need to import that file, and just as footage again, so rather than as a composition, we'll find that JPEG, import it into our assets window, our project bin here, and then I can drag that into the scene. So that's looking good. No animation, of course. I will be able to, to start with, I'm going to create a few kind of compositional adjustments, and this is how I want my composition to finish. So I've just repositioned that JPEG. You can see the bounding box of the JPEG there. To start with, we'll just hide that logo for a sec, and we'll look at the position property of our mountainscape there. Around about 4 seconds is where I want that mountain scene to resolve like it's shown, there. So I'm going to add a position keyframe, P on the keyboard, to bring up that position property, and then another position property right at the start. And if I move that guy, pan it across like that, you can see here is our my motion path. And you can see along that motion path that there's a whole lot of little dots, and they actually represent something. They represent seconds in time, so you can see, frames in time, excuse me. So you can see here along the timeline we're going from 0 to 4 seconds, and when we set up the composition there was 25 frames per second. So you'll see here that there should be 100 frames or thereabouts, going from 0 over to 4 seconds. And you'll also notice that those frames are spaced out very evenly, so there's the same amount of space between each of the frames. So when we do press play, there's a very even movement. It has an even speed right from the first frame all the way through to the 4th frame. And quite often in the real world, excuse me, when things move through space, for various kind of reasons down to physics, things don't move that evenly. Things will speed up and slow down, and that's what we kind of need to emulate in our animations to make them look a little bit more sophisticated and natural. Now, there's a pretty easy way to do that, or to start that kind of process, and that is by using the ease in, ease out, and easy ease functions. What we need to do to implement that is to select our frames, and if I click on that property in my layer, it will automatically select both of those frames, or I can draw out a marquee and select both of those frames. And then I can go up to layer, and under, where is it? Apologies, under animation. Just make sure I've got my 2 keyframes selected. I can scroll down to keyframe assistant, and I can choose between one of these 3 easing options. I believe you can also right click on your keyframes and access those 3 easing options. So let's go with easy ease and have a look at what that does for us. Now, I don't know if you noticed that. I'm just going to undo that and take a look at our motion path here and little dots in our motion path. When I add the ease, it changes from a very regular easy ease. It changes from a regular from regular increments to this situation where we have frames that are closer together at the start and at the end, further apart through the middle. So that's what that's going to do, is it's going to make the speed of the animation quicker right at the start. It's going to slow down a little bit through the middle of the animation, and then it's going to speed up towards the end. So let's have a little bit of a look at that. So that's given us like a little extra element of sophistication to our animation. And you can see that our keyframes have changed from the little diamonds into these kind of cross shapes. Let's just play that again and let it roll through a few times. Alright, so it's quite subtle, but it's definitely there. Excuse me again. To kind of play with that and emphasize that change of speed, fine-tune that change of speed, we need to access what they call the graph editor or the speed editor, the speed graph. And that's located behind another one of those tiny little icons. Here on the timeline is the graph editor icon. We can toggle that open and it will replace the timeline here with a graph that shows the kind of the speed, the trajectory of this animation. So let's have a look at that there. And you can see this is the speed editor. You can see how it starts at this particular point. And I'm just going to open that up a little bit. You can see how it starts at 0 pixels per second, travels quickly past 500 pixels per second, gets to 1,000 pixels per second, and then reverses that speed. Now, you mightn't see this exact graph here. You'll need to go under choose, what's it called? It's called the choose graph type and options. Okay, now let's pull that out, and we want to make sure we have the edit speed graph rather than the edit value graph selected. So the speed graph is where we can make fine tunings to the speed of our animation. So if I select my 2 keyframes, because these points here still do represent keyframes, and I can toggle in and out of the speed editor like that, and so you can see that the keyframes there are represented in terms of their speed in this graph. If I select those 2 guys there, I will end up with this kind of, they're similar to Bezier curves, I suppose, or Bezier handles, and I can actually manipulate that graph. So I've just pulled that Bezier curve all the way over to the left, and you can see now that the animation is going to go from 0 frames per second. It's going to rush right up to 2,000 pixels per second and then slowly taper off. So let's have a quick look at how that kind of looks. And we get what they call an ease, and that adds a lot of kind of subtlety to our animations if we fine-tune that speed using the speed editor. So that's really good, and we might fine-tune that a little bit more in a second. Let's go ahead and add our logo to the composition. So there's our logo there, and I want our logo to zoom up, I suppose, and resolve in a kind of similar spot or resolve at the same time as that background. So I'm going to start at 2. Let's click back out of the speed editor, the graph editor, back into our normal timeline. and I'm going to make a couple of scale, S for scale keyframes on my timeline there. And the first one I'm going to reduce all the way down to 0, so that as the landscape pans across and slows down, we're going to get that logo zooming up or kind of coming into focus. But I think it's a little clunky now, and it'd be good to adjust that animation using the speed editor. And so straight away, the first thing we can do is add that keyframe assistant. I right clicked there, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and let's change those two icons there. Let's have a look at the speed editor, and that's looking good. I could alter it so that so that it starts off slow and then kind of hits towards the end, which I think is kind of good and might be one way to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, just going to undo that, what they call, go right back out, just undoing, go right back out to this, this point here, and I'm going to do something that they call bounce, a bounce animation. So what I'm going to do is create another keyframe at this point here, and go back to this one here and just increase the size of that a little bit. And then when we watch that through, my logo is going to come forward, go a bit further than it needs to, and then settle back into itself. So I think that looks kind of interesting, but with some ease, we can make that a bit more kind of fluid. So let's start by adding the keyframe assistant, easy ease, and then we'll have a look at the graph editor. And you can see that now gets a nice kind of bounce and drops back down. And I can make some kind of adjustments to that if I like. I can kind of refine it a little bit, alter that movement if I like, and definitely will. And I think what we want to get there is a nice smooth curve going from keyframe to keyframe. Yeah, I like how it kind of just like drops back into its position. So I'm going to see if I can emphasize that. There is a couple of other icons that might be useful. This one here fits our view to selection, so that gives us only had those two selected, a better view of that curve, and I can alter it a little easier. It's a bit easier to see. So now I've got a nice shallow arc, and then it should snap back into position when it's kind of getting to the resolution, to its final state. So let's zoom right back out again and see how that's looking. Yeah, I think that's looking good. I'm going to maybe make a adjustment to the positioning of these guys. reckon that's looking pretty good. I'm going to move this along 1 second so I can select all of those pixels and move them along. Just fiddling around here, I suppose, tweaking it a bit. Excellent. So we'll finish off this animation by adding one new type of media, and that is some sound. Now, probably a lot of sources for sound, but one of them that's pretty easy to locate is the YouTube audio library, and that does have a bunch of different songs and compositions that you can download without attribution or with attribution to use in your productions. This is quite a used library, so you probably have heard some of these compositions before in videos that you've watched around the place. It is a nice interface in that we can choose, we can filter the what's available, filter the library, and I want to look for something that's quite short, and I want to look for something that I think short guitar lip. Alright, I'm going to download that and I'm going to add that to my I'm going to add that to my working folder. Oops. Somehow deleted that. I might just quickly download that again. Apologies. Alright, show in Finder. And pop that onto the desktop with my other work there. And then I'll go back over to After Effects and I'll import some sound. Bring that in. So after I've dragged that into the down into the timeline, you can see that in this composition we've got 3 different types of media. So really, After Effects, it really is a multimedia application. We've got JPEGs, we've got a native Illustrator file, and we've got an MP3 file there, all going into this one composition. And that'll kind of bring me to the end of this demonstration. We've looked at the key thing here is we've looked at the speed editor and the graph editor and the easing functions to try and make our animations a little bit more sophisticated and refined.